Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear. Tonight's guest is none other than Bob Fletcher, one of the pioneers in research on Nibiru and an investigative journalist, researcher, author, radio personality. Bob's been around for quite some time, and he's been involved in some very high cases. He was federal witness and foremost a true patriot. It's an honor to have you on the show here with us, Bob. Thank you for spending time out of your day. I know you're a very busy person. How are you doing?
Done. Well, as I always say, I'm hanging in still. As a matter of fact, I a few months ago turned 75. My gosh, that's too old to even be hanging in here. But so I'm getting ancient, and I've been chasing the bad guys for 30 years in terms of corrupted people and our government, which were eaten up by corrupted people in government. They're like ants on a banana on the middle of the beach, for crying out loud. Anyhow, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and we'll get an opportunity to talk a little bit about the potential incoming of Nibiru, which commonly would not be something that I would get involved with, although I had people asking me about it and pushing me towards it several times over the last actually 25 years. But I always stayed away from it because a little bit of that kind of spacey sort of a thing that, if you can't see it, it's always a little difficult to get excited about it. So finally I did, though, and I did get involved, and we, of course, completed a report on it a little while back. I probably should do a little bit of an introduction on myself for those people who have missed some of the things I've been involved with over the last 30 years, actually. And God, it's hard to imagine that.
Well, they say 75 is the new 45, Bob. So
I hope so. But the bottom line is age is age, and your body parts don't work like your mind might be okay in a lot of cases. Some cases that's questionable, but if your mind's telling you you can do that or do this, and you don't feel too much out of sequence, but then when you bend over and try to pick something up, you say, "Uh-oh, can't do that anymore." So anyhow, age catches up to you.
Well, now you said you've been in investigations for 30 years now. We talked before the show, and you were telling me a little bit about how you were involved in the Contra deal about 30 years ago. So, yeah, tell our listeners that don't know much about you, Bob, basically how you got to where you are now and how you're so astute with investigations and current events and a lot of stuff most people don't even think about.
Okay, very good. And I had to really kind of keep this condensed because quite often we end up eating up more time than I really like to on my on the background thing, and we lose sight of what's our major concerns right now.
Sure.
But basically, and it's an extraordinary story. I was an entrepreneur, I guess, is always in my life. I've always been doing several things at one time. One time, actually owning and operating as many as 4 or 5 different businesses simultaneously, and I had been involved in a multitude of real interesting, some amazing businesses. As a young man, I was an executive in the music business for several years. I had my own record company and my own production company and publishing firm, etc., and also had been the promotion director for MCA Records. I introduced Elton John to the United States and was involved with a multitude of promoting and moving the product forward with some of the biggest recording artists in history. So that was pretty exciting, and I was in that executive position when I was 28, 29 years old. And by the way, it's the young man's dream, I would think, be in the executive level in the music business across the country with the biggest record company in the world, the MCA. And it's kind of like General Motors of the automobile, and MCA would be the same equivalent in the record business. And so I had been involved with that, and then I had always had my own businesses after I left mainstream executive level, that side of it with MCA, and I had been with London Records and a couple other major companies. I had opened a business, actually, with a partnership with the fellow who was the consulate general for the country of Liberia, based in Washington, D.C., and I had functioned with him. And his wife, who actually was a princess from the nation of Gabon. So these were West African nations. This is like in the late 80s, or excuse me, in the mid, it was about 1980, 82, that period of time. And I did that for a couple of years, or a year or so, with I'm not saying the word right. Anyhow, my partner being based actually at the embassy. He was the consulate general for Liberia. So it's nothing more impressive than giving somebody your business card, and the second phone number on the business card was that they could reach me or leave a message at the embassy in Washington, D.C. for the country of Liberia. It was pretty exciting. So, and I'm saying that for an important reason. From there, I moved into my manufacturing of a toy and a little invention I had for a great little toy. It was like a stuffed animal, but it had the appearance of like it was alive, a living animal. With your hands outside of it, you controlled it, kind of like a puppet, but it was nonetheless actually something that you didn't put your hands inside. People thought it was alive. So it was really great, and we were doing really well with it. And I merged my company with a bigger company that was, quote-unquote, a holding company that actually turned out to be a division of, that's not the right way to say it. Anyhow, it was literally the arms operation for the national security and the CIA to covertly supply weapons to these little nations when they're having these revolutions, or like we see now with ISIS and all the little different groups of terrorists over there. And it was directly involved with supplying weapons at that time into the Contras in Nicaragua, which of course became the Iran-Contra inquiry. So what happened, unknowingly, I merged my toy company, and their intent was to use my toy company as a covert front for the movement of weapons into all of these little small wars around the world that the United States intelligence community are constantly involved with. And I was right in the middle of it. Of course, it was too late. Once I contracted with these people and merged, I was there, and then they tried to recruit me to function as an information courier into these foreign countries, just running back and forth into countries, taking a message over to somebody and bringing a message back, like James Bond. And I certainly was not trained to do that. It was not my interest. I had lost my toy company, and that was the end of it. From there, literally within 6 months of that event in my life, which blew my mind. I mean, I can't even tell you. And again, it's a wonderful story, but it takes way too much time.
I mean, did it just freak you out when you found that out? Were you in fear for your life almost?
Well, and I was directly threatened. I mean, I was meeting, what was happening after I was in there for a little while, and I had already contracted over, and the business had been actually relocated under the roof of this guy, and he owned about, his name was Gary Best, and he owned about 4 or 5 other companies. One of them was a big company supplying watches, cheap watches for the 7-Eleven type stores, convenience stores, all over the United States. Unto itself, it would have been a big company. And he owned about 5 other companies besides myself after we merged. And I started seeing telexes. That time we didn't have computer systems set up. We were getting telex messages from all over the parts of the world, and they were coded messages, and they were coming in, and they were obviously in reference to things that we were not even dealing with. Like I can remember one particular one was relative to the 4,000 potatoes have been delivered properly. Well, come to find out later on, they were referring to crate loads of hand grenades going into Angola or someplace. So this fella, along with 2 of the major generals that had run the entire Vietnam War. And people remember this movie about Air America that was, who did it? Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson did the thing on Air America, motion picture was popular. And it was drug smuggling during the Vietnam War and swapping out weapons for drugs, being paid in drugs, and bringing them back into the United States. That is continued, had always continued. And so in the Nicaraguan thing, the Contra business down there, we were training the Contra revolutionaries up here, big time in, by the way, Bill Clinton's Arkansas, big time in Arkansas, and also supporting the drug operations out of Arkansas, which were the biggest in the United States. And what we were doing, the military was doing, not us. They didn't do it any of this particular business out of where I was, but they were flying down the weapons and the trained revolutionaries to Nicaragua, offloading the military aircraft with weapons and people, loading it up again with drugs, and flying it back to military bases in the United States of America and offloading them under the security of being a central intelligence operation. Nobody gets to even look at the aircraft when it comes in. So that's how disgustingly corrupted we were doing, what we were doing with the Iran-Contra inquiries. So that I had met those generals in my toy company. I had met General Heine Adderhold, General John Singlaw. Both these guys ran the Vietnam War and the covert operations with Air America. They this was literally like, that's like 15 to 20 years after the war had ended, but they are still quote-unquote suppliers of weapons, and it's a big thing. They subcontract out from the intelligence agency down to these people. So
hey,
they try
Bob,
to recruit me. Excuse me, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up real quick because I recently saw a movie called Sicario, and I typically don't like to watch those kind of movies, but I was bored, and it was the only thing at Redbox. And make a long story short, the movie is about the drug cartels in Mexico and how much power they have and influence and how much of a war zone Juarez is right now. And they're sending in their CIA guys, which they call defense analysis guys, with FBI people, and they're leaving the FBI people out of the loop. And make a long story short, at the end of the movie, this is going to be a spoiler alert here, but at the end of the movie, one of the main characters that was working with the CIA to catch this Mexican drug lord, at the end of the movie, he admits to the drug lord before he kills him and his family that he actually is a hitman for the Colombia cartel, and the CIA are working with him. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it kind of correlates with your story. So
yeah, and it's just terrible. See, during the Vietnam Air America thing, they literally smuggled narcotics inside the body cavities of our fallen soldiers. They sewed them up inside narcotics being shipped inside the bodies of our military coming back from Vietnam. You want to talk about pretty low life kind of a situation. Just think about that for a few seconds. But anyhow, they tried to recruit me. I backed away from it, and obviously, and never was paid, lost an awful lot of money, never got paid properly for my business. And when I told them I was leaving, because I didn't want to get involved with that kind of junk, the fella put his hand inside his pocket, his coat pocket, pulled his hand out in the shape of a gun, aimed it at my forehead, and then pulled the artificial trigger, the pretend trigger of the gun, and told me if I ever said anything, this is how we'd take care of you. So it did not impress me too much, and within a short period of time, they had coincidentally opened up the investigations on the Iran-Contra mess, 1987 it was, and I contacted Washington. I told them that I had information. I'll give you a couple of names. When I give you the names, if it's important, good, let me know. And if they're not, then I'll just disappear. So when I told them who I had met, who had been involved directly with my toy company, they said you were right in the middle of it, and requested me to come in and to come into Washington, D.C., and go from there. So I became an interviewed witness in that mess. And then what happened, because these covert operatives are rather a small knit group, so to speak, and they literally were moving $10 million airplanes deals through my toy factory, and included Hellfire missiles, which they are still using today on the bottom of those drones that they fly around the desert, blowing up terrorists or pretend terrorists, whoever they are. And they were using, back then, they were using the Hellfire missile. They are still using them, and they are $65,000 each. And the aircraft going through being sold verbally, put together the deals on my telephone out of the toy company, were 10 to 15 million each. So that was what was going on. So when I talk about arms, I'm not talking about small boxes of pistols and hand grenades. We're talking very serious military equipment. One deal was put together by Gary Best just before I got drawn into his backyard. He had sold 100 helicopters to South Africa military. That's a big contract, very big contract. So,
yeah. And that was 30 years ago.
Right. And what happened was that after the Iran-Contra thing, of course, there was a lot. I was on television and all that stuff, and blah, blah, blah. So, and stories written up about me all over the place and what have you. They classified my toy factory as a top secret classified operation. So I was unable to go any place. I couldn't go to court and ever get my money back out of these people because it was classified. Signed off by the president, who at that time was Ronald Reagan. But what took place was senators and congressmen, both the left and the right, the Republican Democrats, were coming to me and saying, we're going to be investigating this, we're going to start with this, we're going to start with that, and do you have any information, and what you witnessed, were there any overlaps with this person or that name, did this location ring a bell, et cetera, et cetera. And then also I had people that were CIA and national security and other FBI and a variety of major the alphabet names they call the CIA, NSA, and whatever. They were contacting me and coming and saying, listen, I have something's going on here, but I don't dare step forward. If you can do anything, I'll give you this information. In other words, pushing the envelope underneath my door, so to speak. And so I ended up being involved for the next 30 years, 25, 30 years, since 87, with probably as many as 8 major inquiries. One big one I was working on that got Sonny Bono, Congressman Sonny Bono, murdered on the top of the ski slopes. I had worked with him for about 8 or 9 months, supplying him and his office and his investigators on a major drug inquiry connecting the CIA and a couple other intelligence agents into the drug operations. We were about to go on. As a matter of fact, I had received a call from his people and said, "We're ready to go. Can you get ready? Be prepared." Immediately, it was about the 15th of December, and they called me in my home in Los Angeles at that time and said, "We want you to be ready to come into Washington to start up this congressional inquiry with us, and it'll be about the 15th of January when everybody comes back from the Christmas holidays." And I said, "Great." And we'd worked on this thing for so long, and I was really excited. And 10 days after that telephone conversation, Sonny was murdered on top of the ski slopes and completely covered it up, dragged his body up against a tree, told everybody he ran into a tree and was killed. And that was the end of it. Of course, nothing happens. It had not started. The inquiry, of course, had not been gavelled open yet. So that was the end of it. And so they had controlled that. And 6 months prior to Sonny being murdered, I had been hit in my home at 2 o'clock in the morning while I was asleep and had blown my shoulder apart. And I've been crippled with a
What did they hit you with?
Apparently a microwave type of a weapon actually exploded my shoulder inside my arm without any external damage. Nobody could. The people at the hospital couldn't figure it out. It totally shattered the upper part of my ball of my shoulder. My ball of my arm was blown into little pieces. And I never talked much about that previously until recently. There was a whistleblower on some of the exotic weapons that was on the conspiracy theory program. He was interviewed there. 24 hours after he was interviewed, he was hit with a microwave while he was in his kitchen and killed him. What it does is put you into convulsions until your heart explodes. And he was a high-level whistleblower. He was actually a designer of the electronic weapons, and they murdered him 24 hours after being on the conspiracy theory show. So, anyhow, the bottom line was I ended up doing high-level inquiries and witnessing as a whistleblower, if you will, in many cases, and the whole thing is unbelievable. And it brings me around to about 3 years ago, somebody said 2 years ago, somebody had come to me and said, Bob, we're having like giant amounts of money disappearing, which includes the gold out of Fort Knox. Basically, all of us know that the gold is gone because there had been several attempts for a couple of countries to get their gold out that they had on deposit. A prime example was Germany. Germany had a huge amount of gold in storage in the Fort Knox gold vaults. Been there for years. When the economy crashed in 2008, 2009 worldwide, they tried to get some of their gold back out, and they were told they couldn't have any. And they were also told to not even look forward to a good audit on the gold that's there and the value and all that kind of stuff for 6 years, that it would take that long. And that was 2008. Of course, Germany got pretty upset with that, since to give you a good reason why, they had 1,500 tons of gold in the Fort Knox vault. and they were being told that they could not have any of it out. Eventually, after fooling around for 6 months or something, I think they did get some of it, but nowhere near. And what they were given was financial assistance in other areas without having to get too much gold. So
wasn't China
reality,
also given a bunch of gold bars that were tungsten filled too?
No, that was separate. That was a separate thing that were artificial. They were tungsten or something like that, covered with gold, and that was another synthetic thing. And a whole, but there's an awful lot, and that's another whole wonderful, gigantic expose that we don't have time for. But the gold situation, the bottom line is that it's just not there anymore. And there may be a little bit there that they can juggle around back and forth between locations to make it look like there's a bunch in 5 places and all that. But in reality, the gold's not available anymore, period. It's gone. And they're talking a lot of money. The Federal Reserve, when they set it up under the agreement that nobody had the right to demand an audit of the gold at any time. I don't know how stupid a deal that is. You have Trump talking about stupid deals. Well, that was one of them, that's for sure. Mind-boggling. How would you get into a situation where a group of private banks, which is what the Federal Reserve is, can tell you that we'll watch your gold and do what we want to with it, but you can't find out where it is or how much is left. And I don't kind of the deal that is. That's crazy. So,
now, Bob, have you ever wondered, because it's so easy for the Federal Reserve to just print more money? It's all based upon fiat currency, which is based upon consumerism. So
which is based on air.
Right. So why do they need the gold then?
Well, gold is the only continuing, ongoing, unchanging item of true international value. Gold is worth its weight in gold.
Right.
So the bottom line is that, and the paper money, of course, is nothing, and loans. The Federal Reserve, which oversees the banking and the lending and all of that stuff, they set up their system where a bank can lend like 9 times what they have on deposit. So they don't have to have real, they can lend out $1 billion and not have $1 billion, just have a few million on hand. But they are permitted to lend out money that doesn't exist. It's just a number in a computer chip or whatever now at this point in time. So, but gold is gold. So when everything crashes into nothing, where the dollar's not worth anything now anyhow, so to speak. It's a very, many of the big nations like Russia and China, what have you, demand actual gold in exchange for oil and things of that sort. And will not even deal in American dollars. They don't want to know about an American dollar bill coming in to pay for some of their goods. They want gold or they won't trade. So that's another whole separate bunch of baloney there.
Sure.
But the realization from several directions, including some congressmen and senators that wanted to get an audit, and they were told to take a hike, go away. And then you had even the head of the International Banking, the International Monetary Fund out of Europe, who borrows from the Federal Reserve multi-billions of dollars on a regular basis. They came in, and the president of the IMF came in, and they wanted an audit of the gold in general, representing all the European nations. They told him to get on his airplane and get out of here. Go away. We're not going to do it. And when he threatened to go to the United Nations, they put trumped-up charges that he was chasing a maid for sexual favors around in his hotel room, $2,000 a night hotel room, and they claimed this old guy was chasing the maid, and that if this is in New York City, and if he didn't get on his 747 and go home back to Europe, they were going to put him in prison for the rest of his life. So that's how they handled that. And if you can imagine in your wildest dreams, a guy who's personally worth $1 billion chasing the maid around the hotel room, I don't think so. But it was beside the point. They literally yanked him out of his aircraft while he was ready to take off and arrested him for this sexual stuff and threatened to put him in prison for life here in New York. So he went away, and then when he got back to Europe, they saw to it he was thrown out of the head position of the IMF, and that was the end of his thing. So the gold is gone. That's my point. The gold is gone. Then you have situations where the Defense Department over a period of 10 years or something had lost 2.3 billion. Hold on, let me get it right. $trillion. $2.3 trillion vanished out of the budgets of the Defense Department. And then there was a Federal Reserve where they couldn't track $9 trillion. They just couldn't find where it had gone. Had shipped as a loan in terms of gold, had been shipped to one of the European or a couple of European banks, but they didn't know who it was. So you had all these things going on. I realized that there's no way. I've been involved with investigations of the drugs, finances when Henry Gonzalez was alive, worked with him, supporting him with paperwork and inside information on financial problems, banking. He's on the banking committee out of Washington. And these were always ended up being a crooked couple of congressmen or senators or people that were related to him and what have you. They were stealing multi-millions on a regular basis, and in some cases stock fraud where they knew in advance about contracts. And obviously, if I know that somebody's going to get a $2 billion contract to build airplanes, I go out and buy stock this afternoon, and then tomorrow when they make the announcement, I can make $5 million, $10 million just overnight. And that goes on all the time. It's not supposed to, but it does. And those were the things that I was involved with, besides looking into assassinations and other such events. But I had the realization and the understanding that you cannot money launder $1 trillion. And the idea of money laundering 1 trillion or even a half, but to do it with 6 or 5 or 3 over a period of 10 years even, you can't do it. It's just not, you can't. Okay? Pablo Escobar and the big drug operatives and these people that had worked out of Bill Clinton's Arkansas for so long with immunity, smuggling the drugs in and out and all of that. Some of the biggest drug operations in the history of America came out of Arkansas while Bill was involved with it as a governor and good friends with the drug operatives. Anyhow, matter of fact, Roger Clinton, I have on videotape, it was a police sting. I have Roger Clinton, that's Bill Clinton's brother, while he was governor. I think it was while he was governor, before he became the president, that snorting a line of cocaine, and he makes the crack, I have to get some of this for Bill. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. And that's Roger Clinton on videotape, and we have that. To get back to my point, I realized that there was some kind of a bigger deal going on, something really big to absorb all these funds. Where could it be going? Where would you go with gold bullion? First off, where would you physically put it? You're not going to melt it down and move it any place. If half of it was being applied to something, you'd still have entirely too much. You can't put it in the local bank in Omaha, Nebraska. So I started trying to, and then I started looking internationally, and I had somebody come to me and said, listen, how about the underground facilities? What's with that? They cost a fortune, and why are they doing that? And I had known about it because in '95 I had snuck down in underground the Denver airport in the same month that they finally opened it up.
Could you tell our listeners? Sorry to interrupt. I was just because you brought up that I was
sure. No, go ahead. Anytime, please.
The Denver International Airport is so infamous for its giant murals of dead babies in coffins and stormtroopers that look like they're straight up out of Nazi Reich, Germany, etc. With giant blades. And then there's a lot of stuff on the internet about there being underground facilities in Denver that are linked to other places. And I got to tell you, on your website, BobFletcherInvestigations.com, you've got just, I mean, I love the way you put it all together. It's so to the point. It's very finely tuned. And tell our listeners about what it was like when you were down there underneath the airport. Get into some details, if you would, and how the heck did you sneak there anyway? That's incredible.
Well, what happened was, and now you got to remember, now this is '95. See, this is a long time ago, folks. And I had received pictures and photographs, and also some what was videotapes at that time. They weren't even camera telephones. They were videotapes snuck in different places. And I had actually seen videos of these unbelievable underground facilities in different places around the country. And like you said, there was the rumors of underground operations going on in Denver. And if you look carefully at what was taking place there, you would realize that there was more bulldozers and digging and truckloads of dirt and things of that sort coming out of there. And they had done a couple of crazy things, like built one entire airstrip that was big enough to land 747s, and then they covered it up again and started over someplace else. That was kind of a bizarre thing. And then, like I say, there was always the rumors about it. So and I had also met a fellow whose relative was actually one of the guys directly involved with the construction of the entire facility and the secrecy involved with it. And it was amazing. So it just didn't make sense. You're either building an airport or you're not. Now, if you're building an airport and a small city underground, well, now it starts to make sense in terms of cost and numbers of equipment and that type of thing. So when it opened up in '95, I went into the airport with, and I had a lady friend of mine who was also an investigator with me at that time, and we were looking around, and you could just look and drive around the peripheral area of it and everything. You could see where they were going, 2 miles away from the center of this thing. They were going down underground like moles and digging and bringing stuff up and doing all this stuff and bringing in equipment and just giant construction, like they were building the Twin Towers in terms of the preformed cement supports and girders and all of that kind of stuff. And it just didn't make sense because you got an airport over here. Basically, it's done and operating for the most part, at least good enough to be operating into the public. But then over here and over here and over here, they're still doing all of this unbelievable construction. So she convinced me. This lady who was with me at that time. She had talked me into it. She says, I can get us down underneath. Let's go down over here. I know there's a place where we can go, and da-da-da-da-da. So I said, you're crazy. You're going to get us arrested. And she said, oh, well, don't worry about it. I'll just make like I'm a stupid broad when we get there. If anybody catches us, I'll handle it. So they never caught us. And we went down and we got on board a tram that was actually for some construction guys. And we went down and around, and I use the term, a small city underneath the Denver airport. The pictures and outrageous junk upstairs, which is enough to make a logical, sane person be too scared to even get on an airplane. It's all this new world order military and the rising phoenix out of the burning of buildings and babies and children dead around the world and stuff like that. It's what you were referring to. Most of those have, or not all of them, but a lot of them have been painted over because it's just got to be too much notoriety. But basically it represents the takeover and rebirth of the globe, or America, and the globe, of the new world order, one world government, and basically that's what the artwork represents. And it's very obvious with that in mind when you look at it. I do have an awful lot of those in my DVD, one of my DVDs, and I'm not even positive which one it is, but nonetheless, the incoming DVD that I did on Nibiru and Planet X has live footage of several underground facilities, and there are over 100 of them in the United States. Now, what I found out when I started snooping was that Russia had put out a mandate in about 2008 to accomplish construction of over 5,000 medium-size underground facilities. And they built one facility, and by the way, I have pictures of all of these things in the DVD, and like I say, live footage on some of them. They have one large one way out in the mountains that can handle 50,000 people underground. The biggest one I think we have in the United States can handle about 10 or 15,000 at one location. Now, these are built underground by drilling gigantic holes into the sides of the mountains or under the mountains and down into the ground. And these drills are so large, which, by the way, we have pictures of those as well in the DVD and complete explanation of them. Those are so big that a single medium-sized drill can go into a mountain and back out, and an 18-wheeler could drive in and back out again after one pass. They have them now so large that it can go in and come back out and have two 18-wheelers side by side in the hole that they just bored. All right, that's how big these drills are. They're on railroad tracks, so to speak, of their own, and they plow right through or down under mountainsides, and that's how they build these things. The Chinese, this is amazing, and I have great pictures of that also in the DVD set, the incoming DVD, that the Chinese have one that is the equivalent of two medium-sized drills, big enough for one 18-wheeler each to go in, and a large one, another 40% larger by itself, in the middle of the other two. So what they have is a triple-headed drill that can go into a mountainside, come back out, and you can drive two 18-wheelers down and probably three 18-wheelers side by side inside the underground facilities. I have pictures of 18-wheelers passing each other at intersections underground, as well as crossing over railroad tracks where regular trains can come in underground and offload survival foods. The Russians are doing it. The Chinese have thousands of them. The United States is doing it and has done it, and have filled them all with emergency food stuff. They also have built, which we have great pictures of inside and out, they've also built a thing that's called the Seed Vault. That's located up near Denmark someplace on an island. That is an international cooperative seed vault that holds inside of it billions of seeds, with enough seeds to replace all of the growing items on the surface of the globe when with the idea that there will be a galactic problem big enough like Noah's floods and destroy all growing things on the surface of the earth. And when that happens, they have put away underground into the mountains all the seeds necessary to reseed the earth when that event takes place. So the next point, quite obviously, was what would be this event? All right, so I realized that the elitists at the very highest level are totally prepared for it. They have these extraordinary underground facilities, including trains that are magnetic, levitated trains that can go 300, 400 miles an hour underground between cities underground. I had already seen 18-wheelers had reported to me back in the 90s that in a few locations they had driven hundreds of miles from one state to another underground with their 18-wheelers and then came up in a different state after going into one and coming up from another. And again, all underground drive. These are highways, but they also have independent mag-levitated high-speed trains. And some of the locations are actually totally set up to grow foodstuffs without sunshine underground, and acres and acres of it, miles of it in different locations. So I started looking into what I had resisted for a long time, and that was the Planet X Nibiru planet problem, because that's the only thing, something of that magnitude is the only thing other than a nuclear war that you would require underground facilities and foodstuffs for 10, 15 years stored away and all of that stuff. So I started looking into it, and then all of a sudden I found out, again, I was not a Planet X aficionado. It's not my hobby or anything like that. I'm not an astronomer. And I started looking into it, and I found several groups of people that had been studying it and looking into it, and the reality that it had been documented unbelievably well. And those guys, people like Gil Broussard is one of them, that had done extreme amount of time investigating this, and he, along with a few others, had convinced me that the Planet X absolutely was real. So then I could go back in my own memory, remembering the 1983 period of time, which was when there was extraordinary changes going on, budgetary changes and Defense Department variations, and the Star Wars ideas coming in from Ronald Reagan and George Bush presidency, where in fact they were coming up with this defense concept to put these activated lasers and Star Wars stuff up in outer space, and watching for theoretically nuclear moves of Russia or China. But I found out that a huge number of the telescopes and that were out, and satellites that were being put up were aimed outward and not inward, not really watching Russia or China. They were doing that with the left hand, but with the right hand they were looking to outer space. And so the more I got into it, then I found, like as they say, lo and behold, that the Vatican had built a telescope and cut a deal with America, cooperative thing. I guess that they would fund it and run it or whatever the deal was, or 50-50. And it's an infrared telescope set up, owned by the Vatican in Arizona. And the name of it is Lucifer, which of course that's kind of demonic, so it's a little bit strange. But it's the Vatican's own name for their infrared telescope in Arizona. And that's with the capability to see planets that you can't see with the naked eye or with other telescopes because it doesn't give off its own light. They are infrared, non-visible, and it will not give off any light until it's close enough on its return to illuminate from our sun. So when it gets close enough coming back in, eventually it will be seen as a star in the sky, and then progressively it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, for and there's a multitude of documentation on this. Gil Broussard discovered in China while he actually was over there living for a while, and was able to find out that the emperors, like 1,000, 1,100 years ago, had his astronomers, the emperor of China's astronomers, had written in and a full description of this event with this flaming dragon coming across the sky, and where it came, what direction, how long it took, and that it apparently went around the sun and then back out and had caused an eclipse of the sun and all the rest of that. He just discovered this fantastic, very specific information that he cross-referenced and found out that when they had these last passing of this thing coming close to the Earth, going around the sun, that it had caused all kinds of catastrophic events on the face of the Earth, and that the same events or corresponding events were taking place around the entire globe. So it's not just an event that took place near China or anything like that. It was an event that actually affected and tilted the Earth 26 degrees on its axis. And again, the only problem was that there's a couple problems when people want to know when is it coming. And by the way, I must say this: it's not going to hit the Earth. This particular, the Nibiru, which is considered to be 5, 6 times, 7 times the size of Earth, it's not going to hit the Earth. But when it comes around, it's so large that it will cause, number one, gravitational and electromagnetic impulse problems. It will cause the sun to start acting up crazy, way past the way it is, and do a multitude of gravitational effects. For example, yanking the water right out of the ocean beds themselves, which was Noah's floods. And that was, in fact, probably Nibiru, and causing all the floods and washed across the globe during Noah's time. The studies of the regular Bible itself, and which Gil Broussard also did a great job on, shows like where they describe the armies of like the Roman soldiers being wiped out from hailstones of fire coming down on Earth. Those, of course, were meteor showers, and that was from going through the Earth, traveling through the tail of Nibiru, and it would take a given point in time, or where it will pass. Let me describe this so you can follow this. Maybe Nibiru will come in and go behind the sun, around the sun, like a regular comet, like Halley's Comet does, go around the sun and then back out again. It's going to be dragging a tail that probably will exceed 24 million miles, because that's the tail approximately of the Halley's Comet, is that long. But that's just like a snowball, frozen snowball, so to speak, going around, has no effect on anything. But if we have this pass around behind the sun, we will eventually, on our regular orbit of the Earth, pass through that tail. During that period of time, we will be confronted with meteors and space debris that will be extraordinary. It will take 155 days, is what's been calculated, for it to go out around the sun and then back out again on the other side. We will secondarily pass once again through the tail a second time. And that'll be 155 days after the first problem. And we'll again go through what will be a meteor shower. We're talking floods and tsunamis. And then what also happens, and then I want to make an important point, but what also happens is you have earthquakes and volcanic activity, and all of that, besides the tsunami-type waves being put out because of huge pieces of space junk crashing into oceans, we will have fires on the land from the burning, as described in the Bible, brimstone of fire coming from the sky. We will have that type of an event again, and it will cause also all of our satellites and what have you, the electronic transmissions of everything, for the most part, will probably be gone before it's even really close. In other words, once it starts approaching, there will be a point in time when the electromagnetic effects of this thing is going to screw up our satellites. So you're going to be without communications and lights all over the place, fires, and on the coast, of course, huge ocean waves and movement of the tidal waves, that type of thing. Now, it will head out then and go back and be gone for whatever period of time the orbit is. Now, there's a disagreement between groups of people that have been following this, and that is whether it is a 3,500 or 3,600 or 3,000 year orbit, or if it is only a 350-year orbit. Now, the conflict there is that when they converted biblical writings and these the Oriental descriptions and what have you, when they were describing and converting the ancient manuscripts that kept track of this thing on their last trip or two around the sun, they were not originally using zeros. In other words, it wouldn't be written as 3600 or 360. And so it's easy for there to have been an error. They didn't originally use that description numerically. It would have been like either Roman numerals and or 7 years ago, that type of a description of time. So there may be an error whether it is 3,600 or 360. All that means is that if it's 350 or 360 years, then we would be looking at it coming around 10 times more often than if it was 3,600, obviously. But for us, it doesn't make any difference. In other words, if the government, the powers to be, are anticipating this thing to be within a year or two, all right, or 3 or 4, if it's going to be that close to our time, we don't really care if that means 360 or 3,600. That becomes a stupid point to argue. If, in fact, it's going to be here in a few years, and the government that's watching this is perceiving that that's the possibility. So, again, they're putting foods into the underground locations as survival locations for the elite. You will not get a ticket. I guess if you had enough money, you could, but you're not going to be invited. If a person had $1 million, you could buy an underground facility location. There are commercially available, but I'm not sure if a person want to even do that, because I don't know what you're going to be faced with when you come back up like little moles and you come back up out of the underground facilities. I don't know what you're going to have to deal with. Now, Do you have any questions right now? Otherwise, I want to make a couple points.
Well, I was just going to say, you're talking about the different underground facilities that are out there, and you do have just a ton of details on where they're located on your website. But I had the opportunity to visit Dulce, New Mexico, and I was very fortunate to get commandeered up the Archuleta Mesa, and I didn't have a chance to make it to the very top just because it was very rocky and steep. We didn't have a proper spare tire, so I didn't want to get a flat, 3/4 of the way up. So we had to turn back.
You're talking about the Dulce
Yeah.
location. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the Archuleta Mesa is actually the famous hotspot for where there's a lot of activity. And I talked to several locals from the grocery store, the casino out there, and some other people that don't want to be named, but they all have seen stuff out there that they can't explain. And one person in particular that has a pretty, a very respectable position out there remembers when he was a kid hanging out with his sister up at the very top of the mesa, and they saw these lights, these different colored lights that hovered around for about half an hour, and then they just kind of took off and disappeared. So it's interesting that there's so much weird phenomenon that takes place around many of these underground facilities, or speculation of it. And I wonder if those lights might have some type of, instead of being UFOs or aliens or something, I wonder if it might just be some type of surveillance tech that's been...
Well, yeah, all right, the Dulce location, of course, you have to realize, I had somebody write me and said they had gone out to one of the locations out there and they couldn't find any entrances. Well, that's about the goofiest thing I'd ever heard in a long time, because he was talking about Dulce. The Dulce location is a gigantic underground facility beyond your wildest imagination. Been there for a long time, since probably the 50s or 60s at least. They have done some of the highest level, top secret laboratories and development things in there, besides being obviously an underground facility for the elite. On the ones I have several photographs of several entrances to different locations. Anyhow, on my website actually, and of course they're all live footage underground on my DVD. The point is that the Dulce and others that are really top secret and above top secret, you're not going to see a door that says Dulce Hideout. It's so silly. And people say, gee, I couldn't find no laboratories or anything. That's so dumb, it makes me sick.
Well, and then the pictures,
and I'm not referring to you, but
no.
What I'm saying is that the point is that there's, like in Dulce, there's been UFO laboratories and equipment and that type of thing, building our own UFOs. And, of course, there are things coming in from outer space. We are, like the guy that was the head of the Skunk Works for 40 years, and when he finally was on his deathbed, he said, we've been flying in and out and playing among the stars for 40 years. He says we have types of acceleration that has got nothing to do with combustible engines like you see the big rocket ships pushing these little craft up into their orbital locations and all that stuff. That's an antique. That's a joke. They do that so that people can see those dumb things and keep out of their hair. They have and by the way, well, I'm hesitant to talk too much about it, but I'm working on a new, which is a follow-up to the incoming DVD about the incoming of Nibiru. I'm working on a new DVD. It's probably going to end up being 2 DVDs because of the amount of material. But in it, it'll show you the world will see for the first time put together under one one wrapper, so to speak, the most amazing weapons and spaceships of ours that people have just never seen, can't even imagine, and they are absolutely, it's shocking. They're talking about what they call the Mars One project, which is people going to Mars, and that the first group that go up are planning to go up and never coming back. They're setting up colonies on Mars and probably on the back of the moon. All right. But something that I learned many years ago doing what I've done out of Washington, et cetera, when they're talking about something scheduled for 2018 or 2020 or whatever, it means they've already done it and had it fully functional for 15 or 20 years. And we are out and off of the surface of the earth with human beings right now. And we are probably in at least 2 locations off of the face of the earth. And this is, and when people see my new DVD that I'm working on, don't anybody contact about getting one. I'm not going to do advance anything on this thing. I don't want that. It's too confusing. When it's finished, I'll let you and everybody know, and then people can get it. Otherwise, I didn't even intend to talk that much about it. But I had things that are going to make people's hair fall completely out. It's just, it's mind-boggling what we already have accomplished on the basis of space, exploration, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, and the weapons involved with it are just horrible.
Now, Bob, I got to tell you, what you're talking about is incredible. It's that Star Trek type scenario that I'm thinking of, and
yeah,
certainly
it's there. It's actually there and here. It is here. Those things that we watched on television, in my case, a long time ago, probably before you were around. I don't know how old you are, but the bottom line is those things that we watched as science fiction are completely. Some of them are already antiques, and for us they'll be shockingly new, and for those people developing them, they're all old Model T Fords.
Well, let's jump back to Nibiru if we could.
Sure.
And there's a lot of photographic evidence that looks like there's definitely a second body, a second heavenly body, sun, or planet, something out there. Now, a lot of the ones that I see that are somewhat convincing, I'm not 100% sold. And I'm as neutral as I can on the subject of Nibiru. I've interviewed several people on the topic, and you're definitely one of the real icons. I know that we've had requests to have you on the show. There's been comments left on other podcasts that have been brought forth here at the Leak Project with different guests that have said, hey, this work is, you got to get Bob on the show. So just really glad that we've got you here. I'm gonna pick your brain as much as possible. So for those that have an opportunity to listen to this, can get the get the resources or get to where they need to go.
Right.
We've talked about the underground facilities and the monies, and if we could get into maybe where the most sightings are, and is this why the chemtrails are just blasting the skies so much? Is that one of the reasons to hide it?
Let me dispel some points on these things, like all the photographic evidence that people post up, and some of which you look at it, wow, they're really neat. This is really something, and they look legitimate. And even if people are not intentionally doing fraudulent stuff, and there is an awful lot of that, we have these jerks that get a big kick out of doing Photoshop stuff and doing things, and a moron can do some pretty impressive stuff if you got the right computer equipment. But the point is, let me make this point first off. For the most part, a big thing for everybody wants to know, of course, when and where, and when will we see it, how can we see it, where will we see it first, et cetera, et cetera. All right. First off, you will not see it until it's close enough to start reflecting the sun. I don't know exactly where that location, how far out that will be. I'm not an astronomer, and so I couldn't give you a good calculation. The information I pass on, by the way, is, for the most part, from people that have studied this as a lifetime, almost hobby or career, and it's the best legitimate information and stuff that's been slipped out from government offices that fits into our questions, all right? For the most part, right now, it was anticipated that the last December, a couple months ago, December of that year, last year's December, that we would, at the earliest, that would be the first time it would appear as a star. It did not appear as a star in December. So more than likely, because it appears from all the historic scriptural descriptions and all that of it, of the planet X, Nibiru, that it passed and causes its grief March and April, during the period of time of March and April, which would be the Passover period of time for those people that followers of the Christian faith that would be understand when that is. So it would be March and April, where it would actually be seen in December, and you have December, January, February, as it would be getting larger in the sky in its appearance, coming closer, and then would pass, causing its most grief March and April. All right? Now, it did not appear, so for the most part, I feel we don't have to worry about Nibiru being a direct problem, big-time problem, until the earliest now would be moved up to next year, or this Christmas of this year, or December, some period of time, December of this year, all right, and then moving into next year, March and April. Follow me? 3 months after December. Okay, so that's that. Now, in terms of these pictures where people swear on their mother's grave that they've got the picture of it, first off, and there was a great one that was taken like in Italy or France, and got a lot of people excited about the appearance of it, and it tended to move left to right instead of up and down and all the rest of that stuff. And then many, many pictures with like the sun or the moon, and then alongside of it some places this other giant globe that's almost the same size or a little bit smaller than the moon or the sun. All right. Here's the problem with those. Those are not Nibiru at all. Most of them are electronic, mechanical, or lens refractions causing some kind of a false image on the screen or on the camera film.
Right.
They are not Nibiru. Now, I'm going to put some simple concepts in everybody's mind so you can understand this. By the time it gets to be so close that it's, let's say, I'm going to use sizes here, that where you've got the sun or the moon is the size of a basketball, and alongside of it is this round thing here that appears to be real mass, and it's showing up alongside, and it's about the size of a softball or a baseball. Size of a baseball next to a basketball or something of that sort. All right? By the time it is that close, we will be in a total holocaustic situation of floods and fires and meters and gravitational effects and electronics going crazy, and all of that would already be happening. That's one thing. The second point, to dismay and move away from this, the idea that that's what it might be, like the one in France and Italy, they looked great and it was there, everything else. Why didn't the other 6 million people in that city see it? This one guy got the picture. I mean, where was the other 6 million people?
Right.
Everybody and their mother would see it if it was the size of a baseball next to a basketball. You know, if it was there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so you got to right away say, whoa, give me a break. God, it looks great. It looks tremendous. It's an exciting picture, but I have no idea what the heck you photographed. You know, what's going on with your camera. There are even some electronic chips now that are in the cameras that periodically screw up, kind of like short out, so to speak, or whatever, or create false images themselves. That's not a lens image, but an electronic false signal, and it shows up like that. It's actually like mirroring the moon, and it's down over here. It doesn't look like it, or this, that, but it's, you know, it's got nothing to do with it. When you see it, it will be first seen as a star. It will get bigger progressively over 90 days. You know, then again, they're thinking December because the old days always seems to be in March and April, the worst destruction. The meteor showers, the floods, the water, and all of that stuff. Okay, now, let me go back to my disc, my incoming DVDs. I did something that everybody said I was crazy to do in my DVDs, and that was I did predictions. And now, when I say predictions, I'm not talking about spiritual, psychic stuff. I don't levitate off of my armchair or anything like that, or have spirits come through my living room window. Or anything. Okay, so not that kind of a thing. I did logical, mechanical realities of what will happen if Nibiru is moving into the outer reaches of our solar system. All right. And there's 2 points I want to make also before I move away from what we were just talking about. Nobody knows exactly if Nibiru is in an orbit that is going to be on what they call the plane of the ecliptic, which is our plane, the flat plane that most all of the 9 planets circle in their orbit around the sun. All right? It's on reasonably flat, give or take a few million miles up and down, okay? But it's pretty flat surface, so to speak, the orbital surface, we'll call it. All right? We don't know, nobody knows for sure, if Nibiru is on that same plane. In other words, give or take a few million miles up or down, just like the rest of the planets, coming around in a big, but it's an elliptical, like an egg-shaped orbit that goes way out and then comes back in. All right. If it is, then that changes a little bit of the things like how long it'll take to go around and different variables on mathematics that way. But it might very well be on if you put your arm out to the side of your body flat out, and you call that the plane of the ecliptic that all of our planets are on. Now, and that's reasonably straight out. If you lower it, your hand about 6 inches to a foot downward, that would be like 30 degrees approximately, 30 to 40 degrees off of our plane of the ecliptic. If it's on an angular approach like that, that will change also when we see it, how we see it, how long it takes, and all of that kind of stuff. It would be coming up, punching through the plane that we're on an angle, up and around the sun and back down and out. All right? Now you can do the same thing going from the straight, putting your arm out to the side, go upwards 6 or 8 inches. That would be the same 30, 40 degrees in an upwards direction coming down to the sun. So either like coming down from the attic or coming up from the basement. So if it's on either one of those situations, again, it's going to make a difference of when people will say, oh, there it is, or there it's not. You can't match. Also, remember, you're not going to see, everything's moving all the time. we forget about that. Unless you're really, into this stuff, you tend to forget that we are revolving on our axis, and which, by the way, that spin is like 1,000 miles an hour. That's pretty amazing on our axis. We are going around 360 days around the sun, and all the other planets are all going around in different directions, and all the rest of that. So for somebody to say, next Wednesday, if it was coming in, where should I look? You're going to have to wait till you see it being illuminated by our sun. Now, period. End of story. There's other little variables that enter into this, because everybody says, how come I can't look out in the back? It's infrared also. You're not going to see it until it gets close. I think I handle it. You have to understand, and I know you followed it, the idea of somebody seeing something that's a gigantic mass alongside of the sun. I don't care if it was, people say, well, it was taken in the South Pole, and da-da-da-da. No, that's baloney. If it was that close, it's going to have major effects.
Well, and another thing, though, that I got to jump in here real quick is
Sure,
I have had a lot of responses, not only on my YouTube channel, but I've gotten phone calls from people that I know in Branson, Missouri, and other locations that say, hey, what do you know about Nibiru? And I say, well, I tell them a little bit about it. And then I say, why do you ask? Well, I was looking at the sun the other day, and I swear I saw this heavenly body, this other planet, or this sun-looking thing right next to it, another sun. What was that? So it's very fascinating indeed to think about. Now, another thing that really I've noticed with Nibiru, Planet X, and these broadcasts that I've put together, and I talk to people from all over the world, Bob, and stuff that's a lot more controversial than Nibiru, and these specific topics, Planet X gets trolled more than anything else. I mean, you'll get people on there calling each other every name in the book, and whether these guys are paid trolls or some of them are, some of them aren't. They get into racial fights, religious fights, and then you'll notice people that don't have anything to say except for F off, and they'll all capital letters, you're an effing idiot. This was said it was going to happen in 2003. Then they said it was going to happen in 2012 and 2015. So it seems like there's been so much crying wolf on this topic that it's really discredited what could be happening here shortly. And maybe that was a part of the plan, discredit something this big. So when it does start to happen, well, this was talked about before, so it can't be real.
Okay, so it's been talked about, but it's been talked about and investigated by pretty high-level people going back 50 years, 100 years, 75 years, a long time ago. And I also want to make this is important. I make this point. Recently they had what quote unquote the highly respected couple of astronomers at one of the universities came out and said we've located Nibiru, the Planet X, or they did. The release was like, is this Planet X? It might be, and they did a big deal. It was on CBS News. It was on all the major news broadcasts, and some of the other people in talk radio who had not believed it at all, didn't even want to look at the possibility of it, which included Alex Jones, when I was on a year and a half ago, whatever it was,
yeah.
And he made the crack, well, if I can't see it, I don't believe it, well, okay. But it's infrared, so you're not going to see it. You follow me? That's all. The end of story for that. If it's infrared, you won't see it. So the idea that you have to see it before you believe it is wrong.
Well, is it bringing isn't it a whole system? There's a lot of speculation that and even I'm looking at a picture on your website, BobFletcherInvestigations.com, that shows what looks like, a sun and then several moons around it. So
right.
Couldn't you see the moons?
Basically the analysis, but what is the consensus of opinion of those people that have been following this a lot longer than myself, and Some of them have several doctorates in astronomy, etc. Right? The bottom line is a belief that it's about 5 to 7 times size of the Earth, and there are 4 or 5 moons traveling with it around it. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, it's also going to be dragging millions of miles of space junk behind it, like a comet. All right. And by the way, there was a comet the other while back that they discovered a few years back that was on a 4,200 year orbit, and that was the Hale-Bopp comet. All right. And so a lot of people used to say, well, 3,000 years, that's ridiculous. Nothing would be that big of an orbit, and it wouldn't hold on an orbit going out that far. Well, they did discover and certified and verified a few years back that the Hale-Bopp comet is a 4,200-year comet. So when it came around in 97 or whenever it was, we will not see it for another 4,000 years. Okay, so the idea of how far out and long they go, that threw that in the trash. Because I had a reserve on that myself. I had a reservation seriously on if it could maintain an orbit going that far and that long out. And then when I discovered that, well, there is one that they absolutely know about. Now, in the last year, and I want to mention this is really important. I started to say it where I had made predictions. All right, I predicted that the effects of Nibiru, if it's going to be here within a few years or next year or this year or whatever, is already affecting the planets. And I had discovered, and I have also since then found out, that all of the planets in our solar system are being affected by something. The ones that have atmospheres are having changes in the atmosphere. The ones that, like the moon, actually has an atmospheric haze developing around the moon itself that it never had before. And it is actually a type of a salt, apparently, that's being created around the surface of the moon. The moons, the planets, each one of them are having different effects, like temperature changes radically. The weather conditions, the ones that have storms on the surfaces, are having huge variations in the storms. And I had predicted a year ago when I first released the DVD on incoming, when I first released it, I said, you're going to see an increase in that type of activity. I was 100% accurate. There is an increase in all of the changes, including even movements and wiggling in orbit and things like that. That is taking place. I also said there would be an increase in solar activity, strange activity on the face of the sun. That is absolutely accurate. I also said that has proven to be the case in the last year. I also said that as we watched, that the weather in the next year coming up, and this was about a year ago when I put the first release, the incoming, that I said that the weather on the face of the earth would be the strangest record-breaking weather that we have had in 100 years or 1,000 years. And that is the case. Every day for the last year, there have been records broken with the weather. The biggest storms, the biggest this, the coldest that, the floods that never took place, and this and this and this, the whole long list of variations. I was correct on that. Now, the next point that I made was that you would see volcanic activity increase like we never have had it in 100 years. And that's true. As we speak, 35 to 45 volcanoes are literally active right now, today. They're not even reporting them anymore. Some of the ones, even the organizations that are reporting are not reporting them like they should. Earthquakes. I said earthquakes would increase. They have. They have increased along with the volcanic activity. Of course, those they're now finding are very specifically interrelated between each other. A little group of earthquakes and things of that in a certain area. So many of them going, you can almost now predict a volcanic activity, and old volcanoes that have been dormant for 1,000 years are activated as we speak. All right? So, whatever it is, I'm blaming it on Nibiru. They can blame it on what they want to. Part of the weather changes on the West Coast is due to an underground 1 or 2 volcanic activities under the ocean that they're not talking about. I don't understand it. They are there, and it's heating the water, and that's causing fishing and all of that to completely be changed. Our seasons, in our lifetime, our seasons will never be back to what they used to be, where you could say, here's summer, here's spring, here's fall, here's what the temperatures are going to be. It's not going to be that way for I don't know how many more years. It's not going to be that way.
That makes me think about the possibilities of, the weather manipulation that they're doing right now. It's open. You can type in weather modification on Google, and the first thing that comes up is a website that the company actually specializes in, seeding the clouds, causing rain. So where I'm going with this is, Bob, all of this stuff that's taking place right now around the world, it seems like we're at the cusp of something either fantastic or catastrophic, and with the technologies that we have, we could definitely be in some type of renaissance and things could be just incredible. But the people that have the keys to these technologies seem to be more sinister, narcissistic for themselves.
They're not sharing the keys, that's for sure. and they're not going to pass out free tickets to the underground.
So do you think that they knew all this was going to happen many years ago, so they kind of synced it to this specific time frame, everything collapsing at once, kind of?
Yeah, yes. Because what happened, what happened was in 1983, they sent the first serious deep space as in our own solar system. I don't mean out of the solar system, but way out in our solar system. The first infrared telescopes took pictures and started looking at stuff in 1983. And that was when they saw it and they said, uh-oh, there's that thing that everybody's been talking about for 100 years. And they started calculating, and they ran into the White House and said, President Reagan, we got bad news. So this thing's out there. It's going to be coming. We'll calculate this, we calculate that, but this thing's going to come and do a number on the globe. And that was exactly the period of time with the beginning and the changing of budgets and stealing the money and moving it around and digging the underground, expanded facilities, altering the military facilities and doing all that stuff and changing all the space activities. They were either canceled, changed, moved up, moved over, or whatever. And that was in the 1983 through 85. In the period of time when I ended up in the next year or so being a pain in the butt in Washington, D.C. But so it was that time frame, and it's exactly can be hung around the neck of the big first infrared telescope. And that was when everything changed, and that's the time. Now, they're the only ones to have a good handle on the potential time, and the big deal is we have to watch the politics of the globe, not just America, because the globe is affected here. The politics of the globe is such that all the nations of the world have to be under martial law before Nibiru is visibly seen in the sky by 100,000 amateur astronomers. It will never be announced by any government at all. And when people, like a large group of astronomers a few years ago, were meeting in Switzerland on the basis of getting their heads together and making an announcement, and a gondola they were all in, 12 of them, in a gondola 1,200 feet above the ground, crossing between mountainsides, and it went down and killed them all. There had been a large number of people that were of a respectable scientific background that had been terminated when they were coming out with realistic information. Now, I interrupted myself a few minutes ago. I was talking about the newly cited fellow named Brown and a couple other guys that said they had found and saw in the farthest reaches, they had found Planet X. And it was a big deal. It was on all of the television news all around. And even Alex Jones, as I mentioned briefly, came forward and said, I guess I was wrong. I guess they now have found Planet X, because these big shots had announced it, so to speak. All right? And everybody started reporting it incorrectly. They started reporting that the Planet X, this big infrared giant planet or two, had been located by well-known astronomers, and that it had been seen by astronomers. Okay, that was wrong. That was a lie. It was not a lie, maybe. I'd say it was a misinterpretation of what was said. But what they said was they thought they had located it. There's a big difference between seeing it, which they have not seen it, and doing the mathematical projections of possibility of where, what, and when on a heavenly body that is causing an effect on other heavenly bodies. They have done the mathematics and the computer and doing this and that, feeding it information, if this is correct and if this is correct, and we think this is doing that and that's doing that, what is the cause? And the computer says something big out there.
Bob, do you remember a few years ago when Venus flipped?
No.
Okay, I'm wondering if there's a connection there.
No, I just answered that. I don't remember that. I don't believe it did. Okay, so I mean, and I don't want to get into that because
that's fine.
Bob Fletcher won't do. I won't talk about something if I don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
Perfect.
And that's one subject, so I just don't know about it. Okay, but let me finish the point on this. It's very important. All of a sudden, see, with these guys, with this infrared huge body that may be out there, that's the magic word, may be, all right? They said along with it, like, let's say the next sentence was, it's so far away that we do not have to worry about it on the planet Earth for 1,000 years. Uh-oh. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that all of a sudden, major media is reporting the possibility of this thing. They're reporting it incorrectly. They're saying they saw it. That's not the truth. They analyzed it. They analytically think it's there. That's the truth. But the point was, they told you and everybody else, go back to bed, because you don't have to worry about 1,000 years off. Just go night-night and don't even worry about it. And that was the point. It was misdirection. And God knows the corrupted one world, new world order, governmental directors of your life use misdirection wonderfully, like they did when they told you that 15 box cutter Arabs took over airplanes and brought down the Twin Towers.
Right.
All right.
Oh, and Tower 7 didn't even get touched, but it collapsed within its own footprint.
That's right, just out of sheer fear.
Yeah, it was scared.
Just the fear, the little fear that the other ones fell down caused 7. And I'm going to get into that, as a matter of fact, in my new DVD, and it is the most mind-boggling expose on that part of it that has ever been put together. Okay, now, but get back to where we are here with Nibiru. So the idea that one that they saw, or two that they saw, that they didn't see it. It's baloney, and they told us 1,000 years away, so you can relax. Because when we get back to what I was saying, they're never going to announce this. They cannot. If you just stop and think for a minute, all right, if they were legitimate government that gave a damn about the world, okay, they would be concerned, because as soon as it's a realization that something is coming in and may cause Noah's floods, in simplistic terms, Noah's floods over again, the world would go completely bizarre. They would go crazy. It would be the end of everything. Banks would close. Nobody would ever go to work. There would be rapes and murders and thievery and robbery, and it would be like Sodom and Gomorrah, for crying out loud, across the globe. So they can't tell the people that it's coming. That's never going to happen, folks. Never at all. So what do we have to look at? Well, we need to worry about the fact that they have to have martial law in all the different respective nations of the world. All right? And to have that, it's easy, very easy. They have to convince you. And by the way, they wrote all this down as a plan 40 years ago. And I'll explain that in a minute.
Well, that kind of makes...
Black and white printed in black and white what they were going to do. All right, and I'll get back to that in just a second. The bottom line is they simply have to do 3 or 4 serious events of artificial terrorism, whatever it is, Twin Towers in 4 different nations, in Twin Towers type activities in 4 states. And you can, the American people will be screaming for martial law. Put the troops on the corner. Oh my God, we can't do it. Thank God we got the troops on the corner. Oh boy, the president declared martial law. That's going to save everybody's life. All right, or it can be a medical problem. It can be a plague, or Ebola, or some kind of a medical situation that's out of control. They're telling you it's out of control, and whether it is or not.
There's a global pandemic right now for the Zika virus. You can actually go to a specific government website, and there is a global pandemic right now. Whether it's real or not, who knows, but it's actually in effect.
Right. And that's true. And they've gone in and out with the Ebola thing a couple of years ago, right? All right. But it has to be, let me give the third one. The third one would be pending World War III with Russia or China or both or all or half, or Russia, China, North Korea, who knows, right? But the equivalent of World War III on the verge of breaking out, all right? And we are in that situation right now. We are in a situation where in 5 days you could have 3 or 4 World Trade Center type Twin Tower things, and if that happened, that would be good enough. Now, but here's the important point, and it's also part of the written declaration of all this that I was talking about that was done many years ago. It has to be the appearance to the American people. That's all we'll talk about, the Americans. It has to be the appearance to the American people with the fear of death. So it can't be, some babies might be born sick, or this or that, or a small thing. Some people over 60 might get the disease, or this or that. It's got to be a fear of death in a major manner, where everybody that gets up in the morning in America is sufficiently scared of their very survival through the day if the military doesn't come in and put people on the corner. All right, so it has to be a fear of death. Now, where did they write this? I'm assuming you're aware of a thing that's called the Report from Iron Mountain. If you're not, that's okay.
Please share that with our listeners. That'd be great.
Okay. Well, you can get a copy of this It's called The Report from Iron Mountain. You can get it from eBay, actually. You can go on, or go on Amazon. Actually, Amazon has it. Somebody's reprinting it. All right. I discovered it in 1995 when I was involved. Actually, when I just before I testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the Patriot Militia Movement, and that was June of 1995. And I testified also that the United States government had weather control. It was the first time anybody confronted on a national exposure the fact that weather control was real. I did that before the Senate Intelligence Committee, 1995 June. I had just discovered, a short time before that, this report from Iron Mountain. The report from Iron Mountain was a book printed in 1967. And what it was a huge, in-depth study put forward by Kennedy. It was commissioned by Kennedy. Of course, Johnson and the rest of those guys had him killed, so Johnson was the one that ended up getting the final report. Kennedy never got it. Johnson got it. The report originally, the physical report itself, is 7,000 pages. It is based on what does the government of the United States of America have to do to convince the people of the United States to be happy in a one world government, the New World Order, one world government of a parliamentary type structure, the elimination of the Constitution of the United States, and a parliamentary la-la land with everybody of the world holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And what were the things that had to be done to move the United States into world government? It's called Report from Iron Mountain. Again, you can get a copy. I don't sell them. I'm not hustling them or anything. Just telling you. It is the most upsetting thing you will ever see in your life because it includes 9 or 10 items on a list that these are the things that we have to do to America to take it into a world government. And on the top 9 or 10, it includes having a false flag major event attack on the United States by a new enemy that we will have to create, and it will be called terrorists. It will be a non-governmental enemy called terrorists, and it won't be backed by a government. It'll just be these random groups of terror people doing terrible things, blowing up things and stuff like that. They also put on the list of the top 10, we have to control the weather. That's spelled out specifically there. And it goes right on down. Everything that has happened, they have originally set out in 67. Now, when it was done in 67 and completed in 67, it was started out earlier. It took them a couple of years to do it. The report from the Iron Mountain is because this top secret location of Iron Mountain, which, by the way, I have pictures of in my website and on my DVD, that secret location underground is where they used to meet to figure this out. They even figured out how many people had to die in wars to make them logical. It says that war is the only thing that holds a nation together, is having wars on a regular basis. And it's the only reason that a nation requires government and governmental directors, people running their lives in Washington, as long as there is a threat of a war next month. As long as there is a threat out there that there's going to be some bad person, the people of the United States, need a government and an army under the direction of the governing people. and that we have to have wars every once in a while to maintain, and also to get rid of the lower class, non-educated persons in the country. Best way to get rid of them is to keep maintaining wars on a 5 or 10 year cycle.
Now, do you think that they're actually going to have a good chance of microchipping the majority of the American population? And if so, do you think that it will get to a global scale because you're talking about a global governance?
Oh, the answer to your question is yes. Let me put it this way: that's on the list. They want to be able to do that, and it'll start out. And I mean, this also, by the way, my people discovered in 1995, thereabouts, 94 or something of that sort. We discovered that first implantable chip. It's about the size of a grain of rice, and we made a big deal, what we could at that time, about it. The microchip configuration today is the size of an asterisk on the typewriter. All right, the size of a typical printed asterisk is the size of the implantable microchip. They will probably do it, and then that's biblical also. If you don't have the mark of the beast, that you will not be able to buy in the marketplace. And eventually it will be that, providing we don't get hit by this galactic intervention of Planet X or Nibiru.
Right, right.
See that?
Will that destroy most of our defense systems, Bob? Like make it obsolete, like the F-35s, the F-22s?
Oh, see, let me tell you. Well, see, there's there's combinations of intricate things here. And by the way, they have planes and weapons, which you will see in my new DVD. Hopefully, I'll be able to get it finished. They're planes and weapons that let me put it this way: every year or two, by the time they start producing 50 or 60 of these super planes, for example, they've got upgrades on them that makes them obsolete. I mean, it's mind-boggling. We're moving at such a rapid pace in terms of the above top secret levels. People think that people have no idea what kind of weapons and aircraft that we have now. Just don't even. I mean, and you're gonna find it hard for them to believe it when they see it. Even when they see it, they're not going to believe. They're not going to understand what they're even seeing.
Were they prepared for what to do with the nuclear reactors and all of the facilities that hold the storage?
See, that's something else that should bother people tremendously. The amount of money we're spending on research and all the rest of that. What it's being aimed at to be right out in front, and people can believe this or not, and if they don't, they're wrong. What they are aiming at is getting off of Earth and having at least two other locations that are starting to develop human people being born and growing up and dying on other planets. That's what they're going for, because they need it. They need the alternate location, for one thing. They understand it. The time is running out before Earth has the major galactic problem like Nibiru, or even a more localized thing like 2 or 3 big volcanoes blasting their top off again, like a Yellowstone. When Yellowstone blows its top, the United States is shut down for about 100 years. End of story. And that's just one volcano on one location. And they're blasting now. Volcanoes that haven't been active in 1,000 years are now blowing their tops. And one or two, like they talked the other day, that fellow, I can never think of his name, the Oriental fellow with the white hair, this is astronomer, does a lot of news.
Morikaku?
Yes. he came forward, it wouldn't have been 90 days ago or something like that, when he was on ABC, CBS, and every major station talking about this giant volcanic, earthquake that they're anticipating that's going to happen off of the West Coast. And when it happens, it's going to simply take everything out from Alaska to the northern part of Mexico. And it will just wipe out Los Angeles and Frisco and everything else. It will all be gone just from this single earthquake, a giant fault that nobody paid attention to just off the West Coast. See, and that's just a single little event. But so the people at the highest level for at least since '83 have been thinking and moving to get us off of the planet and putting some colonies on a couple of planets and starting that life cycle at other locations, because they're going to need it, because they're not going to want to handle 100 years of nothingness. I mean, it's just hard to imagine. We also have the solar flares. When Janet Napolitano quit Homeland Security a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, when she left office, she said, be aware that we are going to have the electromagnetic impulse from the sun or from an enemy big enough that when it hits us, all electronics on the United States of America, or half of the globe, will be down for 50 years. Now, because what we're talking about with a solar flare from the sun, or the equivalent of that in some type of a bomb, all right, an electromagnetic force being exploded above our atmosphere, affecting half of the globe at one afternoon. Now you have to think about electrical power. Every single thing in the United States off, black, turned black, nothing's running, no power, no generation, no way to fix it for 50 years. And see, people say, well, let's see, they could, no. If they don't, if you have 5 giant generators in a warehouse big enough to replace burned out generators at the Niagara Falls, just one place, one location, one giant generator, and it's 20 miles away, how do you transport it when there's no fuel, no gas, no engines, no police, no electronic signals, no banking, no money? All the money you thought you had in the bank, it's gone. It was just a number on the computer, and the computers are all gone. And nothing running, pitch black, for 50 years. No ability to get gas or oil out of the ground, no manner by which you can refine it, and no way with an impulse. See, with the electromagnetic impulse that Janet Napolitano was talking about, you're talking about burning the generators up that supply the power to the United States of America. I mean, we can't perceive it. I get really irritated if the power's off more than 30 minutes.
Right.
I mean, you really get. And then, of course, also you realize, and we do stupid things like, I caught myself doing it the other day. The power was off for a little while. So I got up from my computer. I said, well, let me go in and watch television. That was stupid, all right? Because there wasn't any power to the television. But we can't imagine it. No cars, no policing, no fire, nobody coming to put out fires, no hospitals, no power of any sort to anybody for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 50 years.
You think it's going to... Oh, sorry. Now...
No, I was just saying it's mind-boggling. It's something when you can't, when you start to think about it, you can't think about it. It's way over our heads. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that can cause that. whether it's bad guys or just a solar flare. But the point that I was making was that the bad guys at the highest level that have all of our money, they got the money, all right? And they don't care. They do what the heck they want to in terms of experiments and stuff. They've been working and diligently pursuing second and third planet locations for the people who get their butts out of here. And for starters, they dug holes in the ground for themselves. We have 100 nuclear facilities in the United States.
Yeah.
What happens, like happened in Japan, they had one or two of them overheated because they had no power.
Right. All 6 went into meltdown, and then you've got plutonium, uranium, all sorts of just nasty isotopes around the globe, everywhere. It's absolutely horrific to think about. I know that just next to the Madrid fault line, there's almost 50, there's 55, I think, nuclear reactors, nuclear facilities next to the Madrid fault line. That just makes no sense.
They're all over the place. And it's really goofy. I mean, it's kind of like mine.
Let's put them right there.
Yeah, right. And of course they did that on the basis that, we got these automatic things, and if the earth shakes a little bit 100 feet down, it's going to shut everything off and do all this, and it automatically kicks in the water pumps. Well, now what I just got through talking about, you're not going to kick anything in because the power's gone. There's no pumps, nothing. You can't pull gas, can't pull oil out, you can't refine it. So we have no transportation. The transportation fuel that's in storage would be used and consumed so fast you would think it was drinking water. So that'll be all gone. And the food, where are you going to get food when the power's off all over, let's just say the United States. When all the power's off in the United States, in 5 hours, the foodstuffs in all the grocery stores is stolen because there are no police cars or no phones, no police communications. All of that would be gone. And if the solar flare is big enough, when it comes in on its way in to knock us out, it's going to take 1/2 or 1/3 of all their satellites at the same time. 1/3 of the satellites out, that's all the banking of the world, all the rest of that. It's just really crazy stuff. But the point is, I see another thing you have to ask yourself, when I got looking into the money disappearing and those guys going underground, right, building all these survival location for the elitist. That's all it is. It's for them, not you or probably anybody you know. Okay? So I started looking at it and I said, maybe this is why they're not spending anything for the last 20 years on the infrastructure. It's been, stop and think about that. See, now when I say nothing, what I mean obviously is, I don't mean nothing. There's always a few million here and there going to little things and fixing this. But the bottom line is the bridges and buildings, electrical plants, the running water, all of those things, all of the fuel, the electricity, the water lines. Look at the water lines in up there where they're having problems with it in Michigan. Okay? It's on the news all the time right now. All right? That's because those pipes are 100 years old. And it's poisoning. All those babies, all those children that live in Flint, Michigan will be brain damaged forever. There's no way to make them better. If they have drank that water with the lead in it in Flint, Michigan for more than a couple of months, the chances of them ever being mentally right is very slim. That's disgraceful. But they're not spending money, nothing. The bridges are 75, 50 years past repairs. The underground tunnels going in and out of New York City, going under the water, they all need to be repaired. every single thing in the infrastructure of the nation of the United States is in need of repairs. Why haven't they fixed it? Where's the money going? It goes towards super planes, super weapons, super this and super that. Now, or you say, well, okay, well, what good is that? Well, let me tell you what good it is. Those people at the highest 1% level, the ones that have 90% of the wealth, are going to maintain control and power over the rest of the enslaved citizens of the earth with their weapons. They could care less as long as they have the power and the control with the weapons and equipment that they're building with our tax dollars instead of fixing the pipelines of every major city like Flint. Of course, it's not a major city, but it doesn't make any difference. All those kids, whatever, half of them, two-thirds of them will be mentally screwed up for the rest of their lives. And lead is non-reversible right now as a medical problem. I ran for the United States Congress in 1990 after being a witness in the Contra stuff and seeing the corruption. And the guy I ran against in Florida was recruiting mercenaries and drug operatives in his congressional office, while at the same time he was a witness, one of the guys sitting on the committee on the Iran-Contra investigations, making like he was a legitimate investigator, and he was recruiting mercenaries for the cause, for the Contras. I ran against him, and I just did it because I was so angry. But the only reason I even bring that up is that I ran, part of my platform was, when are they going to fix anything? Where's the money going? They're stealing. They steal more money than it would cost to fix Flint. It would only be a few $1 million to fix that stuff. They didn't bother with it. Now we got, dying children. What is that? But they don't care. They don't give a damn. The last thing that they worry about is some kids in Flint, Michigan. They laugh. Get out of here. It's crazy.
Well, and I mean, could you imagine with the amount of resources, the monies, the technology that they have access to, if they could use that towards a positive influence on the planet? I mean, it's amazing to think about what could be done, but instead, because of the just absolute amplified 100% narcissistic, and I mean, not even just narcissistic, but beyond that. I mean, there's so many people.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. Now, what do you think? Do you think that literally, I mean, within the next couple of years here, we could just be seeing some real serious, mind-blowing events take place and unfold right in front of us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it. And all over the place. And it's only because I've gotten involved with this stuff here, and of course chasing these criminal characters for so long, and even at my age, I keep track of things, and I have people that contact me, from a huge spread of, I'm talking about, and I don't have as much as I used to, only because time actually has passed where a lot of guys out of Washington, heavy-duty people, senators and congressmen, and the head of ATF and the guy at the Pentagon, for crying out loud, that used to call and report to me on a regular basis just to keep me up to speed. And a close friend who was in the Central Intelligence for years and years and years and years. And these people are just getting old, and a handful of them have passed away, and few of them murdered. I had a good handful of friends that have been murdered. There was 3 attempts to kill me in 30 years. Not too many. But
they gave up, huh?
No, I never know about that. But, big deal is I slowed down. I was really, I remember when I ran for Congress, Senator John Kerry's offices. The guy called me, the guy that was running his office actually, and he called me, and for one thing, he said, we were looking at the district you were in. He says, a good chance you won that election, but they had the electronic machines were criminally set to kick over, to kick over like every fifth, on let's say on the Democratic side, every fifth one would kick over to the Republican side. So he said quite seriously, I was within 9 percentage points of beating the guy, and he said, you may have won, and then and you'll never know, And then he said, because I had helped them out with the drug investigations and stuff like that that they were involved with for about 2 years. And he said, what would you have done if you'd gotten up here? Which is a good question, because I'm not a political animal at all. And he said, what would you have done if you'd gotten up? And I said, well, I tell you one thing, I would be a real pain in the A, I won't say it on the air, but I would be a real pain in the butt. And he laughed and he said, I got news, Bob. You are already considered to be a serious pain in the butt up here in Washington. And I said, well, that's the best thing I've heard in years. And other situations where literally had attempts on my life, and one of them was in the middle of the Iran-Contra inquiries. I had a guy drive through my wall with a station wagon. It was supposed to be an accident. I had 2 known hitmen come down and try to set me up to go into the 20th story of a building, a hotel in Miami or in Orlando for an interview for the Iran-Contra hearings. And I surprised them by showing up with my lawyer along with me. So, but the intent, once I got in there, I realized there was no setup to do an interview. They were planning to usher me out the window, which they had done before. And then I was hit in Los Angeles, which permanently removed my left arm. I can't use my left arm at all. That was totally destroyed. I've been living with that for 20 years now. But I just slowed down. I was still all over the place. But this fella, Phil, I never can remember his name. Anyhow, that was the engineer, one of the engineers for the underground facilities that had come forward, and
Phil Schneider.
Schneider, I apologize to Phil. We became close friends because I was doing speaking engagements with him on a regular basis. We were on the road together doing speaking engagements, and he told me, he said, I want you to take my books. I'm not going to need these because they're going to kill me. I'm going to be out of here. And he gave me books that were his father's stuff when his father was in Nazi Germany doing work for Hitler, engineering stuff. And a couple of let's see, I think about 4 weeks later, he was right. They murdered him. I had a good friend, Mike Rupert, good friend of mine. I had introduced him to a whole bunch of stuff, and we had helped each other out back and forth a few times, and he ended up killing himself, supposedly. I guess he did. But he had gotten so terribly upset with the realization of what was going on, he supposedly took his own life. And there's just a whole bunch of them. Good friend with Aaron Russo, and he died of cancer. Aaron Russo was a motion picture producer, very wealthy, became a patriot when he'd gone over my stuff. And I had an interesting situation with a draft of my book that I was putting together, which is extraordinary. Just it's the greatest story. It just is. If it was from anybody, it would have been great. My story about the Animal Factory, my toy company, and how they took me over and all the rest of that stuff. And Emilio Estevez got a copy of it, and he went crazy. Oh my God! He called me. He said, I want to produce you. I want to do a movie with you, and I'll play you as the lead role. I'll play it myself." He said, "This is just the greatest." His quote was, "This is the greatest thing I've read in 5 years, and I read scripts all day long." And he wanted to produce a full-blown motion picture. But then when he got the last part of my book, which involved the fact that Bill Clinton was involved with the drug operations before and continuing into his presidency, his father, Martin Sheen, was close friends with Bill Clinton. That was the end of it, and Amelia didn't want to do, he just disappeared. And, we were literally, the last conversation we had was, "I'll call you next week and we'll put together a contract." And I said, "Great," and that was the end of it. Once they went over the last part of my book, which included Bill Clinton, somebody decided not to do it. So that was the end of that. But I have an awful lot of friends, a lot of close associates, and a couple of them really, really pretty close friends. And when my arm was blown up in Los Angeles, and then 6 months later was when Sonny was murdered on the ski slopes. And by the way, I did a full investigation on the Sonny Bono murder. If anybody's interested in that, that's still available on my website, and it's pretty good. I got his autopsy. I was working with his mother's lawyer for about 2 years, and got finally we got his autopsy. His own mother couldn't get the autopsy, and when I finally got it, it was ridiculous. He was pistol whipped to death on a mountainside. They dragged him up against a tree and make it look like it was a murder. And I had worked 8-9 months supplying Sonny with the information to put together a big investigation. I'm talking banking accounts and internal memos. I got the internal memo from the Iran-Contra before anybody had it, and supplied it along with other papers, drug papers and stuff, that like Oliver North, who's now a hero. He's got a TV show and all this garbage.
Right.
Oliver North, I had his personal note that said, "Supply airplane to pick up 1,500 kilos of mash in Nicaragua." His handwritten note.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, that's what they said when the Congress saw it. They said, "We never even saw this. Where did you get this?" I had all of his internal papers that were not redacted. All of it non-redacted paperwork. And it's in the DVD I did on, it's called CIA and Drugs in the Central Intelligence. That's also still available. Shows all those papers. And Ali was found guilty of murder and assisting murder, assisting and aiding and abetting in Nicaragua. He can't go back, or Costa Rica is where it was found. He can't go back to Costa Rica. He'd be put in prison. He was found guilty of murder. So, whatever, drug connected and all that.
You certainly have lived a life out of something like a Tom Clancy book.
No question about it.
It's fascinating, and I certainly am glad you're still around, and you're doing what you're doing. You're bringing out just all this incredible information. You certainly are an icon for many people out there, a definite patriot, and I applaud you for what you do. Thank you so much for coming on here tonight with us, Bob. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it, and we'll go from there. Oh, then let me do this. If people grab a pencil, anybody who thinks they want to drop me a note and don't want to go through the computer, or if you want to purchase my DVD or get a a list of without being on a computer. You can mail it to Bob Fletcher, Box 216. That's Bob Fletcher, Post Office Box 216, Bayview, Idaho, 83803. Send me a note if you want. And by the way, the DVD is $24.95. It's 2 discs, 4 hours. It's like a library of information. And we pay the shipping, so there's no extra shipping for it at all. If anybody's interested, we'll send you our catalog if you want. So drop us a note. Thank you very much.